Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today, it is my absolute pleasure to be welcoming Phillip Campbell onto the podcast. And I'm going to let Phillip introduce himself because he is a man who has so much background, has so much goodness, and is such, I think, a well-known name in the homeschooling world, but I don't think it's well known enough. I would like to help get more eyes on your work, Phillip. So welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here, and please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm very glad to be here. My name is Phillip. My favorite food is lasagna. My favorite dinosaur is Stegosaurus. No, I'm just kidding.
Perfect.
Actually, those things are true, but I'm sure that's not what you want to know. Yeah, so I've been a teacher for Homeschool Connections since 2009, teaching history and various social studies subjects there. And your listeners might know me also as the author of the Story of Civilization books from TAN and various other historical writings. I think I just counted the other day. I've published over 15 books now that I've authored. So that's pretty cool. And I'm working on more as we speak. So mainly I'm like the homeschooling history guy for for high school. And I like to travel around promoting the study of history and of just talking about all things education in general.
I love it. Thank you so much for that. Did you know growing up that you were going to be a teacher? Like how this is, let me preface this question because
Okay.
one of the biggest things that I hear from my clients and from people who reach out to me, they're really and this is something I think too. Like I have all of the thoughts as a homeschool mom as well, but like I'm really worried about my kids and their futures. My clients are very, very worried about making sure their kids are doing the right thing or on the right track or keeping up and not falling behind. And I just really love your story about how you came to what it is that you do. And now you are kind of a well-known name in the homeschooling world. And so I think it would be very easy for us to think maybe you already knew, maybe you had it all figured out from the age you were like 8 or 9 and knew for sure
Yeah.
you were going to do this. But if that's not the case, could you just kind of share your story with us a little bit? How did you get here?
Yeah, it was not the case at all. I had no inkling I was going to go into education. My career took me through multiple different. I used to think of them as dead ends, but I don't anymore. They're mainly just, other paths I went down and then turned around. I got to where I am through many zigs and zags. I basically had no ambition at all for anything when I was growing up. I didn't really give much thought to my career. Actually, people had me pegged as an artist because I was a very talented artist growing up. In school, the kids would always be gathering, and the teachers would be gathering around my desk, like watching me draw things. And I was that kid that took like, 5 semesters of like, I did art and jewelry and pottery and like all the art classes. I was that guy. And so I actually got my parents just assumed I would go into art. I got a scholarship. I got a full scholarship to go to an art college in Detroit, the College for Creative Studies, which is a prestigious private art school. And I went there. I didn't even go there right out of high school. I took a few years off and just, I was kind of rambunctious as a teenager. I wasn't a practicing Catholic or really anything. I did like typical secular, teenager things. So my mind wasn't really on these things. But I went to college and then I just wasn't prepared for the rigors of college life. Uh, I I had gotten A's, throughout high school, but in college right away I started getting, C minuses and D's because I wasn't really acclimated to what college demanded. And I found out that I didn't really like art school. Like, just because you're good at something doesn't mean you want to do it professionally. It doesn't mean I see all these things today where people are good at something and so they want to monetize it or turn it into like a side hustle. Just because you're good at some hobby doesn't mean that you're going to like monetizing it. So
Mhm.
I found that I love drawing, but like I didn't like doing it for 7 hours a day, for under these very specific set of directions. And so I dropped out of art school without telling my parents, mind you. I didn't tell them that I dropped out of college. I was too embarrassed. And for a couple months, what I did was I'd leave my house every morning as if I was going to college, and then I'd drive down the road and hide my car in a cemetery until my parents went to work. And then I would come home and like go to sleep or something. And then they'd come home and think I was at college all day. So I was like completely, sorry if I'm scandalizing your listeners with the story, but um, I was just saying like I really had no clue what to do, and I eventually fessed up and everything. And then I just kind of entered the workforce as a blue collar guy. I got a job at a gas station, and then I was a janitor, and then I was like, I did all these things. Eventually, I went back to college, to Ave Maria College, now university, but I still had no clue what I wanted to do. I really went to Ave Maria just to learn. It was a very innocent decision. Like I was starting to embrace Catholicism, and I was just like, I'm going to go study at this Catholic liberal arts college just to learn my religion, and to get that degree, and I didn't really know what I was going to do with it, like many that get a liberal arts degree. In fact, I was very naive, and I didn't even know like what the degree could be used for, or how, I just kind of had this naive sense that my life would be better with it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I went, and then after I graduated, I still had no sense of what I wanted to do with it, and I started to wake up to the cold reality that a liberal arts degree doesn't make you rich,
Yeah.
Um, so after I graduated college, I started, I was a midnight tow truck driver. I was a salesman for a water treatment company. I did all these different things. I was a worked in pest control. And eventually I decided that I wanted to go into education. And this kind of happened slowly as I started engaging with young people more, like at my parish. I was doing youth group work at my parish, or I was teaching, I was like, doing VBS or teaching RCIA. And I just kind of discovered that I had a knack for like when I got in front of a crowd to like really almost like an entertainer. I had played a lot of music in high school and was in a bunch of bands, and I was used to being on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like at first I didn't even treat education like I didn't think of it about as education. I thought of it more as like I like being in front of people and being on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I started exploring being a teacher, and I was very disappointed to find that in Michigan, my liberal arts degree like counted for nothing for being a teacher. Like the state of Michigan was like, you need to do this whole other 4 year program. And I was like, oh. Now at the time, my mind was really only thinking in terms of public school. I didn't really think about homeschooling or private schools just because I was raised in the public school and I didn't really think of anything else. So I went to Eastern Michigan University to get my teaching certification, but then I didn't like it because it was too liberal, so I dropped out. And then I eventually found Madonna University, which was a Catholic school, and I got my teaching credentials there. I did a whole separate program. It took me 5 years. So by this time, I'd been in college. I'd had a 4 year degree, and then I had a 5 year degree from Madonna. I could have been a doctor by then.
Yeah.
Um, so then I got my degree and I was like ready to teach, but by that time I didn't want to teach in the public school anymore. like the
Mm-hmm.
like the process of learning about what it was like and of doing my student teaching. I did student teaching in multiple public schools and private schools. I learned the system inside and out, and I was kind of like, like, I don't know if I want to do this. And also, I was just growing in my faith, and I was learning more about homeschooling. Started homeschooling my own kids, and I was just like, I don't want to participate in this system, really, you know. So I got my degree or my certification that I'd worked for 5 years to get, and I was like, I'm likely not going to use this. And then I went to apply, but I thought I'd give it a try. So I went to apply for some jobs, and it was like the beginning of the Great Recession. There
Mm-hmm.
was like 200 applicants for every job opening, and I had no experience whatsoever, no background. So it just like wasn't happening. I couldn't get an interview at all. So I was just like, I felt like the whole world was conspiring to cripple my career. By this time, I was like almost 30 years old, and I felt like my life still hadn't started, like it was like stillborn or something.
Mm-hmm.
I had no career. I was still just like doing whatever job kind of paid the bills. Um, Anyhow, that's when Mrs. Whitman recruited me for Homeschool Connections. She kind of came down like, I was like Peter sinking in the water, and she was the part of Jesus, like reaching out and lifting me up. She
Mhm.
was like, she's like, I'm starting this weird homeschooling online thing. And I was like, education online, that's creepy. Okay, whatever. But I needed some money, like
Mhm.
it was originally a side job. I was doing multiple other things. Um, I think I was working 2 or 3 jobs, like teaching at a local co-op, still trying to do youth director stuff, with the youth group, just trying to like do anything I could to like exercise teaching in these small little ways, and she offered this job to me and I took it and I'll never forget her pitch. I even recorded a history in a minute episode online about this that you can see on the Homeschool Connections channel, where she gave me the worst pitch in the world, where she was like, "You're not going to make any money, like we only have like 20 students in the whole program, so maybe you'll get like $30 a month or something, but whatever, that's better than nothing. Times are hard." I
Mhm.
was like, and I was like, yeah, $30 is $30, take it.
Mhm.
And then years later, it's funny. I was quitting my other jobs and paying my mortgage with Homeschool Connections after a while
Yeah.
because the program grew. So it was not until and then in terms of writing, I had always been writing since I was a kid, but I never thought of myself as a writer. I just kind of thought like it was too hard to make a living that way. I started trying to like write my first book when I was 29, and it wasn't until I was 35 that I had my um first piece of writing that I was paid for, up front, you
Mhm.
know. I had other people publishing things of mine earlier, but it was kind of like you have to publish it for free or you
Mhm.
write it for free. And then maybe if we sell copies, you'll get royalties.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until I was 35 years old that someone valued my work enough to like guarantee me a paycheck for it.
Mhm.
So I was like in my 30s before this was all settled, you know.
Mhm.
It was a long zigzagging route, and I did many, many jobs. I mean, ones I didn't even talk about. I worked in a truss factory, making trusses. I delivered pizza. I did all sorts of things to pull it
Mhm.
together.
Yeah.
So it was a long zigzagging path.
Yeah. So, what do you think would be useful for parents to hear when they maybe hear this and they're like, oh my gosh, like that maybe sounds like I don't want my kid to go through that. I want them to like get like shortcut that. Can we just shortcut that and like get to the part where they have it figured out? Like, what would you tell them?
You know, um, it's hard to say because obviously, if I could have shortcutted that, I would have liked to. you know, like I would like to go back in time and go right to being a teacher and writer and not have to work in the trust factory, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
Um, but that just wasn't my path. And you know, if there is a way to do that, that's great. But what I often tell kids is like, I think young people and parents, they want to feel like there's a predetermined road with like very predictable like um milestones, that like you pass this milestone, you check this, you're on the path, kind of like following IKEA instructions.
Right.
Like you just get like this predetermined course that you follow. And if you check the boxes, then everything's going to be okay.
Hmm.
But the fact is, like, even if that, so I will say, even if that path exists, like, even if you think you have a shortcut, it guarantees you nothing.
Right.
Um, like, how many people are there out there who, and you've probably looked at this, I don't remember the numbers, but there's millions of people who are working in fields not related to their college
Hmm.
because they just, for whatever reason, it didn't work out and they're
Yeah.
doing other things. I see it all the time, you
Hmm.
know? How many people are there who think they wanted to do one thing and they set down that path and then they, for whatever reason, they couldn't complete it or it didn't work for them,
Hmm.
or just they do everything, or they do everything and they get a job in the field they trained for and then they hate it,
Hmm.
or
All of that
something
is
else.
possible.
Yeah, or life throws them a curveball. They get a chronic
Mhm.
illness, or they, maybe you're talking about a young woman who studies to do all these things and then she falls in love and gets married and they decide she's going to be a stay-at-home mom, and that's what she wants to do. And it's like, even if you have that, so what I tend to focus on is I tell people there is no path except for the one that you create. Like that's really the truth. And it
Mhm.
sounds very generic, but it's true. Like that idea of like a predetermined ladder that if I just like step on each rung, I'm guaranteed this outcome is completely illusory. It's something that colleges and whatever try to sell you to
Mhm.
get you to commit to their program, but it guarantees you nothing. There is no there is no path except the one that you actually walk down and make. And in the end, the skill, in the end, it's not the training that you have. It's not like the papers that you have. It's more like the skills you develop, the character you grow, and most importantly, like the way you develop interacting with other people, learning to present an air of of confidence and having a good work ethic and making the right connections. Those are all way more important. So I don't know. I kind of am starting to think, watching the way the world is, that like maybe a broad range of experiences are going to be more helpful as the price of college continues to inflate, as the economy becomes more uncertain. I start to look back now that I'm getting older and I think I am darn glad I had all those experiences.
Mhm.
I did not like going out at 1:30 in the morning as a tow truck driver to change somebody's spare tire on the side of the freeway and
Mhm.
being under their car and all filthy and wondering why did I go to college, when
Right.
I'm doing this.
Mhm.
But every experience deepens your character, I think, in a way. And I'm glad I did those things now. Um, I'm glad. I've often thought that when I get old and retire, I'm just going to devolve back to that. And I'm going to go to my local restaurant and just be like, I want to be a line cook, and
Mhm.
just sit there and make French fries all day, and
Mhm.
come home and not have, just punch out and not think about it. Just go back to doing blue collar stuff because I found it rewarding in a simple way. So anyhow, that's a long-winded answer, but I would just challenge parents and kids to think about that. There is no guaranteed outcome. You really have to create your own path.
No, I love everything you just said, and what I would just hearing you and hearing what your story and your path that you followed, I could, being able to look at it kind of from a zoomed out lens. I would think that all of the experiences you've had lends you more. It makes you a more interesting teacher, first of all, but also gives you more authority to speak to your students from that place of you don't have to go to college and do a very set, specific path. There is no necessarily straight path. There's no guaranteed path. And I think, like you said, nowadays with how the economy is and how everything is moving, and there are more and more people working from home and online and becoming entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's very different from when we were kids, right? That was the normal path that we thought was the right thing to do, was you get out of high school and you go on to college. And we
Yeah.
weren't really like encouraged to go off on our own. We weren't really encouraged to think outside that box. And now the box has like been blown up and like disintegrates clear. It's slowly disintegrating, I think. So I think that
Yeah.
your experiences through all that and your growth through all of that, um, I think just lends you to being not just a better teacher, but also a better catalyst for God's will to other people, like to your students. Like God's will, he is both active and permissive, right? He like acts, he makes things
Mm-hmm.
happen, he permits things to happen, and all of it can be for your good, for the good of the people that you're going to influence. And so I could just see how his will was completely at play through all of that and helping you grow so that you could be this amazing teacher for the kids he wanted you to influence someday. And then all the other people that these kids are going to go out and influence, the ripple effects.
Yeah, and it's like that for every one of us, There's always some, and I do think about that now that he was there leading me the whole way, even if I didn't understand it. And I've taken things from all of those experiences I've had that I still draw on, you know. I remember I did multiple sales jobs, I was selling water treatment equipment. I was selling pest control services. I was at one point I was basically a door-to-door salesman at one point, like doing cold sales where I got paid nothing unless I sold something at that house,
Right.
and I lived off of that for 9 months,
Mhm.
and you know what though, and that that sucked. Can I say sucked on your podcast?
Yes, you can.
Like that sucked. That was, but like, you know what? Like I remember as part of that, I went through all this intensive sales training where they were like, here's how you talk to people, here's how you make people feel at ease, like here's how you Here's how you present yourself, and I learned certain things from that. I learned all these little tidbits that I carry with me. I learned that if you struggle with forgetting a person's name when you're talking to them, that you should make sure to repeat their name 7 times during the conversation. So it'd be like, well, Emily, and you like keep saying their name over, because I
Right.
would be at sales calls and I'd forget my clients' names,
Mhm.
and that's embarrassing, or I learned things like that that the first, they say first impressions make a big deal. I learned that like the first thing people notice is the way you walk into the room, like your gait, how you come into the room.
Mhm.
And I learned kind of like these little things about that were all relevant as a teacher, like being in front of students, how to present yourself, how to talk, how to build relationships. And it's like that with everything I've ever done. Even, I worked at, people always like dunk on working at McDonald's, like they're always like, you don't want to wind up flipping burgers at McDonald's. Well, guess what? I flipped burgers at McDonald's,
Mhm.
at multiple McDonald's. I worked at
Mhm.
McDonald's and I had a lot of fun there. People asked me what was your favorite high school job. It was working at McDonald's. I had a bunch of friends that worked there. I was the burger flipper guy. We just had a ball. Like sometimes it was busy, but like it was a great job.
Mhm.
For the age, I liked it. I learned the proper technique for mopping that I still use.
Right.
you know,
That's
for how
awesome.
for how to mop a floor and make it look clean and not see
Wh-
all the streaks and stuff.
What is that? Can you share that with us? Because we all
Well,
want to know.
I'd have to. It's all
Can
in
you
the
do a
wrist,
demo
Emily.
for? Can you do a demo video for us?
It's all in the wrist.
Yeah,
Um,
that's awesome.
So no, I worked at McDonald's, multiple McDonald's, So whatever, like all those things, the important thing is that you have, at the end of the day, it's like, are you making a living or aren't you? Are you growing? Are you learning job skills? Are you being responsible? Are you building a work ethic? Are you learning the value of a paycheck? You know,
Mhm.
are you learning the dynamics of how to be in the business world? You know,
Mhm.
those are all the things that matter.
Mhm.
Um, so everywhere you go, you take things with you. And as long as you have that attitude of like, this isn't just about like me making a buck, although that helps, this is about me picking up skills and finding my way in the world,
Mhm.
then it becomes of tremendously more value.
Mhm. Do you feel like those are the skills that would help your like for your students, those skills that you just mentioned, would that help them prepare for the rigor of college? Because earlier you were talking about how you just weren't ready for it. You weren't ready for the rigors of college. And that is something that a lot of our listeners worry about, especially once your kid hits freshman year. That's like panic mode.
Well,
Is
I
how
don't
do we
know
get them
how
ready?
I don't know how mopping is gonna like help them at college, but no.
Work
um,
ethic.
yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Now part of it too, like I mean, I started working when I was 14 years old.
Mhm.
And that was normal for me. I'm
Yeah.
43 now. Most of my friends started working at 14 or 15 also. I'm always
Mhm.
surprised when I have students where they'll be like 18 and they haven't worked yet. For
Mhm.
me, that was like, I don't know. I don't want to sound like an old codger, like back in my day, I started working when I was 7 and had 5 jobs. But, there's a little bit of that,
Mhm.
where we just seem to start working younger. And, but I don't know. I did all that and I still wasn't prepared for college though,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
because um because college was a whole different set of requirements.
Mhm.
But I do think it helps. See, the problem in my case was I think I just came from a very very blue collar upbringing where it was a big deal. It was a very big deal that I was going to go to college and that I had a scholarship. My mom was
Mhm.
the first person in my family to go to college, you know, and she went to a community college where she had to work as she worked as a cashier at the local A&P,
Yeah.
uh, um, and then she went to college at night.
Mhm.
So I was the first one in my immediate family to get like an actual scholarship to go to like a 4-year college.
Mhm.
And I didn't really have any pointers on what to expect. I didn't really understand. And honestly, I was still, I don't know, I was still like in teenager mode. I still wanted to like hang out with my friends and party, you know. And I
Mm-hmm.
think this is something that I often think of where I often encourage kids, like, if you just, sometimes students will say to me, like, I just don't feel like I'm ready to go to college. And I'm like, then don't. Like, if you don't feel like you're ready, like, and especially homeschoolers, they're starting to graduate earlier and earlier.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid, it was very common. You just graduate when you were 18.
Mm-hmm.
Kids now, they frequently, I see students, they're starting dual enrollment at 16 at
Mm-hmm.
college,
Yeah.
and a lot of them, like my daughter, she graduated like a week after she turned 17, and she did not feel ready to go to college. And I was like, don't go then, just take a year off. So I
Mm-hmm.
think my issue was that I kind of like went to college before I was mature enough. Although once I did start college though in earnest, Ave Maria, yes, absolutely. All those job skills, all those experiences helped me. I graduated magna cum laude, which people were astonished at because like I was much older than everyone else.
Yeah.
I was starting Ave as like my second time at college, and
Mm-hmm.
I already had kids and stuff. I was going to college when I had kids, and like I was working, like people knew, like they knew that I was going to college and then delivering pizza at night, or like, but I was like busting, harder than like the kids who were just living on campus and had no job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was like working a job, do all these things. They were like, how do you even do all this stuff? So I think that work ethic is extremely important. And uh, one thing, I just recorded a video about this on my channel, which is, by the way, Mr. Campbell Explains on YouTube.
Thank you.
Mr. Campbell Explains. I just recorded a video about motivation because people would always ask me my whole life, like, how do you get all this done? How do you write how much you do? How do you maintain good grades when you're working night job and stuff like that?
Mm-hmm.
And people will say, I just don't feel motivated to do these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I just tell them, like, you know what? Like, motivation is overrated. Like, this is about willpower. This is about putting one foot in front of another. Motivation is like the lubricant, like the WD-40 that you spray on your actions to help make them easier and more fun, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But like at the end of the day, it's kind of like, if I wanted to like learn to do 100 push-ups, you have to do that. How do you do that? You start by doing one, and then you do
Mm-hmm.
five, and then you like, are you motivated to do push-ups? No. Like, I hate doing push-ups. Like, am I motivated to get up at 6:30? No. But
Mm-hmm.
I force myself to. So when people ask, how do you do all these things? I say I force myself to. And they often don't like that answer because they're looking
Mm-hmm.
for some life hack to make it
Right.
fun. And I'm like, I force myself to, the way you force yourself to run a mile or
Yeah.
get up at 5 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And then here's the big thing, like your motivation comes after you accomplish something. Like,
Mm-hmm.
accomplishment generates motivation. You start to make these little steps. You're kind of like, oh, I learned how to mop the floor. I learned how to work the cash register. I
Mm-hmm.
learned how to do this. I can do 10 push-ups now. And then the motivation starts to build as you get closer to your goal.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people, they're kind of like they want to feel good about what they're doing. They want to feel motivated first
Right.
before they do it. And I'm kind of telling people, like, you just got to do it. Just you just got to do it. It's
Yeah.
willpower, and then the motivation kind of comes after the fact.
Yeah. No, I love that. And when I went, so as a life coach, what I talk about is like your thoughts and feelings. Okay. So I'd like
Yep.
just like to kind of break that down for my audience who's used to hearing me talk about it a certain way. Like willpower is a finite resource. We can run out of it really quickly. But
Yeah.
if you can tap into like determination, or if you can
Yeah.
tap into that, like that goal you have, and you want that more than what you want the discomfort of going through this now so you can be there,
Hmm.
then you're willing to go through all of that in order to reach that goal. And then the way that you think about, like, okay, I'm even capable of doing that, right? I'm even capable of getting out of my comfort zone and getting to that, um, is what helps you feel determined. It's like, I'm going to make this happen
Yeah.
and I'm even
Yes.
capable of it. It's when we don't think we're even capable of it that our motivation goes away.
Yeah.
And so like the more
Yeah.
you do it, the more opportunities you give yourself to like prove to yourself you can do it, and the more motivated, the more determined, and it's this really beautiful cyclical habit that you
Yeah.
can create basically.
Yeah. Like small victories,
Mhm.
as you do these little small victory,
Yeah.
like breaking things down into manageable steps,
Yes.
doing just this one thing, like when I'm writing a book. I just finished a book that's not out yet at the time of this recording, called In Pursuit of Wisdom, Science, and Catholicism Through the Ages. It's a
Mhm.
history of the church's relationship to science. It was massive. It ended up being like 100,000 words over or something. And I don't sit down and think I need to write a 100,000 word book.
Right.
The first thing I do is I draw up a table of contents and I say I need to write 14 chapters. And then I take a chapter and I say each chapter is going to have 5 sections. Each section is going to have around 2,000 words. And then I sit there and I say, can I write 600 words today? You know,
Mhm.
and so I make a series of small choices that all cumulatively tend towards the goal.
Mhm.
And that's very much the same as like your career choices. Like you don't necessarily think, well, maybe you do. Maybe some people are just like, I'm going to be a veterinarian. I don't know. I was never that sort of guy.
Mhm.
But I think like, okay, I need to, when I was a kid, I would think like, I want to buy this new bicycle. It's $150. I need to make $150 in 1 month. Here's what I can do. And I would wash dishes at the big boy restaurant on Saturday and Sunday for $4 an hour. My dad would drive me up there and then I'd get my $120 and I bought my bicycle and I'd say, now that I have my bicycle, I can ride 5 miles from home. And so now my employment, now that I have control of my, 5 mile radius, I can get a job anywhere within that circle. And so I got a job at another restaurant and I rode my bicycle there. And then I started looking and said, I need a car. At the time, a car, I get one for $1,000. I need to save, 8 weeks of paychecks. So I work for 8 weeks, and then I just get the car. And then the car increased my opportunity further. And I've been in the workforce since I made that decision when I was 14. I need $120 to get my bike. I've been in the workforce nonstop, and the thought process has stayed the same. I need $250,000 to get this house, or I need this much a month to pay off this loan, the student loan, whatever. It's just kind of taking your goal and then breaking it down to your manageable steps, and then thinking, what do I do today? What do I do right now that helps move me in that direction? And it doesn't matter if like I'm not there now, like, oh, I'm so bummed I haven't been able to get my whatever that I want. Like, well, like just do what you need to do today. Make a series of
Mhm.
small decisions, and then you'll get there. That's
Yeah.
the way I view it. So I don't know if that's what you wanted to talk about, but that's kind of like my philosophy on this.
No, I love that. And I think it's really powerful because the way that I say that is just what's within my control right now.
Yes.
Okay. Like, what,
Yes.
okay. Yeah. It doesn't help me to like go beat myself up about what I did or didn't do up until now, or as a mom, what my kids have or haven't accomplished or produced or learned. And I don't want to spin out about this big, huge end of, time goal, getting my kids to graduate college when they're only like 11. We need to get them like, what can we do today to move us toward that goal and being completely detached from the actual outcome, right? Because we don't even know the path. Like you said, we don't know what God has in store for these kids someday. We don't even know what he has in store for us later today. It could
Yeah.
be completely different. So we go and we do what is within our control right now and move forward toward what we think he's calling us to do, and then release the reins to him and to trust him completely with our kids and with their future and with our future. And really resting into what's within our control right now, what's within my control right now. Cause even my kids, like they're not within my control either.
No,
So
no, not at
me,
all. Did you
that's it.
did you I've had the experience in my own life of, and I've seen other parents deal with this of finding out that their kids have radically different interests and personalities than they do. You know,
Mhm.
like like you have a parent who's very academic, and then it becomes clear that their kid isn't. Not that they're dumb or something, but they're not interested in like the book learning and in theoretical stuff. They're interested in something else, practical things. They want to be. I've seen people who are doctors of philosophy or literature or whatever, and they're kind of like trying to like put their kids through the same program they had, and then the kid is kind of like, I want to go hang drywall. And then the
Mhm.
kid goes off, and then maybe the kid starts a tile company or they work the trades.
Yeah.
And there's always a bit of like the parent having to like realize like, okay, my kid is not me.
Mhm.
um I can't pass on my interests and my gifts. They have to discover their own.
Yeah.
you know and that's one thing I really appreciate about my dad and my mom is they did not try to. I mean, I think they wanted me to be an artist because they thought I liked it and they seemed like I was good at it, but they never tried to really coerce me down any path. Whatever I did, they were supportive.
Mhm.
When I told my dad, I'm getting a job washing dishes here, he was just like, fine, I'll drop you off on Saturdays. He was just like
Mhm.
happy I was working. He didn't pass judgment on what jobs I chose to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that was helpful. It wasn't like, well, what's your when I spent a year just working at a gas station and doing nothing other than working at the gas station, my dad was never like, what's your end game here, son? Like,
Right.
where's this going?
Uh-huh.
That would have
What are
been
your
annoying. Yeah.
intentions?
Yeah. What are your intentions here?
Yeah.
I was like, my intentions to work at this gas station, and
Yeah.
go. I would work at the gas station, and I would go rollerblading with my friends after work, and that's what I did when I was 19.
Yeah.
Whatever. We all find our different paths. So I don't know. I think it's good for parents to maybe think like, maybe your kid isn't on the same path you were,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they have very different interests, and how can you nurture them where they're at? It's becoming clear to me. My son, he's 15. He doesn't seem to be very interested in academic stuff or books. He's very much more, I think he's much more interested in tech, or he's even, he's talked about wanting to learn how to do electrical work and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, and how can I facilitate his interest in those things?
Mm-hmm.
And he's very savvy about business opportunities. He's always like, hey, does that old lady next to us, maybe I can mow her lawn for money, and
Mm-hmm.
he's, and I've told him, I was like, dude, when you're 18, there's no lawn mowing company in my town. Like I'll finance a truck, get a trailer, you run the you set the appointments, we'll run a lawn mowing company, and you can,
Yeah.
monopolize the market here, and he's down for it.
Yeah.
So
Hooper Scooper is like a thing in my area. They like
is it
hire
really?
people to go and like pick up the dog poop in your yard and they will come and do that for you.
Oh,
And
that's
people make money
hilarious.
doing that. I just this summer I recorded a podcast with a fellow life coach and his son is power washing people's garbage cans for money and
Mm,
making money doing that. And I'm like, that's just incredible. Like how in just capable they are, how creative they can be when we allow them to be.
yeah,
And we have to kind of live with our own discomfort. We have to be willing to sit in our own discomfort of that while they're figuring it out. And that's the name of the game as parents and home educators is learning how to be uncomfortable while the kids are growing and kind of taking their time
yeah,
to figure this out and really trusting that they can figure it out, that we can be there. I talk about it being like a consultant mindset, like we're their consultant, especially in their teen years,
yeah,
because they need to learn how to make those decisions. They need to learn
yeah,
how to do things without us catching them and doing it for them. Um, so I think that that's really cool that your son is doing that. I love that. Um,
yeah, yeah. And he is mowing the neighbor's yard now.
that's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah,
Okay, so I have one more question before we
yeah,
wrap up. And this was just something that I wasn't planning on asking, and you can feel free to speak on it as much or as little as possible or as much as you want to. But earlier on, you talked about when you dropped out of college, I was too embarrassed to tell my parents.
yeah,
That caught my attention because I'm really like, I think parents will want to know, like, why did you feel embarrassed if you're willing to share that? Like, why did you feel embarrassed about that? If they were supportive, if they were, not judging you for all of that, what was that thought process? Because I know parents are going to want to, at least the moms listening, I think for the most part to this podcast, they
yeah.
want to create the relationships with their kids and that where the kids feel like they can come to them. And it sounds like you felt like you could tell them a lot of things. So what was it about this particular decision that maybe was hard for you?
Well, my parents were generally supportive of me, but we weren't very, like, we were all very like reserved people. Like, we didn't talk about our feelings and stuff.
Okay.
I didn't come to my parents with problems.
Okay.
They weren't bad parents at all. We were just all very reserved.
Mm-hmm.
They were very supportive of my college endeavors, and they had actually put a lot of work into it. My mom drove me everywhere to like I mean, for art school, you got to get a whole bunch of supplies. She drove me down to the art stores to get everything. She paid for it. She took me down to back when they had the microfilm lab,
Mm-hmm.
before there was digital stuff. I had to take my art and have it like photographed and put on microfilm so you could put it on a slideshow for when they
Yeah.
were deciding if I was going to get the scholarship.
Yeah.
So she took me to the microfilm lab to have my art photographed. She gave me a lot of money. My dad bought me a big drafting table and assembled it in my room. They were very proud. They weren't like
Mm-hmm.
pressuring me, but they were very proud because, like I said, my dad didn't go to college. My grandpa didn't. My mom went to community college. I was like the first one to like take that leap. So there was a lot of like pride, in me doing that. And I got that scholarship.
Yeah.
And part of it, so part of it was just like I didn't really share a lot of things with my parents. I was very private with them.
Hmm.
Part of it was just like because they had been so supportive, I was like extra embarrassed that I had not been able to cut it. Part of it was that I was like embarrassed for myself, because my whole life drawing had come easy to me. It
Hmm.
was something I did almost second nature. And then I was failing at it. Like I was seeing D minuses on my report cards. And there was like a personal disorientation of like, what's wrong with me that I can't do
Hmm.
this? And it was all too much to think about.
Hmm.
So I just dropped out and I just thought like, I dreaded having that conversation of like, Mom, I don't want to do this anymore.
Hmm.
I was just thinking about all that they put into it. And they, after the fact, they were like, we would have infinitely wished that you would have told us.
Hmm.
One problem was because I was so green, I didn't know that there was such thing as a drop date. Like if you drop a class before a date, you can get refunded for it.
Yeah.
If I'd talked to them about it, they would have like found out that I could have made these drop dates, but I didn't. And so like basically I didn't even formally drop out. Like I didn't go to the college and drop out. I just stopped going,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah.
And so I forfeited all the money, and everything they paid. So basically my mom gave me a bunch of money and then it just got wasted.
Hmm.
And I didn't even realize that. And so they
Yeah.
were like, look, for all these various reasons, it's infinitely better to just tell us what's going on
Hmm.
than to just hide it. But I was simply too embarrassed. It was honestly, Emily, it was the first time in my life that I had real failure, because I was always good in school. I was always
Hmm.
successful at things I tried to do. I was always getting promoted at work. And this was the first time where I entered an environment where I was not succeeding and I was actually failing. And it was a huge blow.
Hmm.
So I think that's what was behind it. It was obviously more about me and my own insecurity about where I was in life than anything that my parents did.
Hmm.
They were pretty ticked when they're like, your college sent a letter said you haven't been to class in 3 months. I was just like, yeah, I dropped out. Oh. They were like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
you know, that was a little strained, but
Well, I think I wanted to kind of dig into that. Thank you, first of all, for even just being willing to talk about that.
yeah, you're welcome.
But I wanted to dig into that because just as a life coach, I hear those things that just stand out to me about our experiences and those emotions that we're feeling. And a lot of the times as parents, we take the blame. We take the blame for what our kids are doing. And I think it's so important for us as mothers, especially, and we do have dads listening to this as well, but for us to remember that our kids have their own humanity, that they have thoughts and they have their own feelings, and it's more likely about them than it is about us.
Yeah,
And so just
absolutely.
calm all of that down in our bodies, because when we get really worked up thinking that we're missing something, that we're not doing something, that it's our fault, that our kid is off the path or whatever, we think that whatever's going on in our brains, it's just really, it gets us so worked up that we don't show up with our kids the way we would really prefer to. It doesn't sound necessarily like your parents went down that road. And we don't have to talk about that if they did, but
No,
um,
they didn't. They didn't.
yeah, like being able to really show up the way you like that you truly want to, and being that mom that you really want to be is going to help protect that relationship, help solidify the foundation of the family and the faith that we want them to be able to come back to, regardless of where their path takes them.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
thank you for being willing to share that.
oh, you're welcome. I kind of we still kind of laugh about it. My daughter just went to she was going to Wayne State University in Detroit, and she ended up dropping out after a semester and deciding to go to community college instead.
Mhm.
And it was kind of a funny joke in the family after she dropped out. My dad was like, "At least she told you about it, huh?"
Well,
Oh, that was
hopefully
very
that's like
thankful.
not a jab, but like a no, we can all laugh about it. Now it's
Yeah,
been
yeah, it's
long
been
enough.
24 years, so but it's still a recurring joke.
Mhm.
But yeah, I guess just yeah, to show you have to be kind of when you mentioned a consultant attitude, you do have
Mhm.
to be a little bit detached. Like first of all, as parents, like we have to be secure in our own decisions and in our own parenting. If we are constantly insecure that everything our kid does is like a repudiation of us, or
Mhm.
they're disrespecting me, or like did
Mhm.
I do something wrong, then we're going to be very hypercritical and we're not going to be there for them in the right way. you need to have almost not detached because we're emotionally invested in their well-being, but in
Mhm.
a certain way, you have to have a certain level of detachment from the decisions that they have agency about. You have to be willing to let them do what they're going to do and discover their own path. Because like, what is the and I'll end on this because I don't want to just ramble forever, but like, what is the point? Like, if you're like, I'm going to homeschool my kid, I'm going to teach him virtue, I'm going to teach him to make all the right decisions and whatever, but then you never let them go out and make the decisions,
Right.
like what is the point? And the thing is, like, one thing that I notice is that it seems like kids have less and less agency these days.
Hmm.
Um, there's a societal tendency to have you ever noticed that like they're trying to extend childhood to be longer and longer? Where
Oh yeah.
like, oh, like at 18, you're like I don't know, 18 used to be a hard cutoff, like you're an adult 18, but then it got to be like, but you can't rent a hotel room if you're not 22. You can't rent a car if you're not 25.
Yeah.
You can't buy a cigarette if you're not 21. You can't like it's basically like they're still treating people as children into their
Mhm.
20s.
Yeah.
That's kind of like a social thing. But even parents, even homeschool parents, even Catholic homeschool parents, I'm
Hmm.
seeing more and more of like, I don't want you getting a job until you're 17. I don't want you maybe dating until you're out of high school. I don't want you doing these things. Like they're basically still under the sort of scrutiny that maybe would be appropriate for a 12 or 13-year-old until
Hmm.
they're 18. And see, the thing is, like, we want to prepare them for adulthood, but part of preparing for adulthood is you need to have like dry runs before adulthood actually starts. Like
Hmm.
you need to have some experience making decisions with agency before you're actually an adult while you're still in the safety of childhood.
Yes. Yes.
You can't just like train them up and be like, you're not going to
Mhm.
get a chance to do any of this stuff until you're an adult. Okay,
Yeah.
now you're an adult, now do it, but also now there's full consequences,
Right.
and if you screw up now, you really screw up. Like that's just kind of nuts. That's like getting on a plane and you hear the pilot say like, "Oh, this is my first flight," and it's
Yeah.
with passengers. You're like, "Are you
Yeah.
insane?"
Yeah.
So I'm really a big proponent of like letting go a little bit of what
Hmm.
our kids are doing. Yes, they might mess up. They might do things that we don't agree with, but like it's vastly better to let them make a mistake when they're 16 than to
Hmm.
hold on too tight and then they make a mistake when they're 25 and it's much more the consequences are more long lasting. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Oh, absolutely. My husband and I have a general rule of thumb, and sometimes our kids take a little longer to ease into this, but by the time they're about 14, they're three-quarters of the way out of our house. And so they need to be making about three-quarters of their decisions.
Yeah, that's
And
that's great.
so our 16 and a half year old, they were just talking about this, at the dinner table. And my husband and I were not even around. I just overheard them. I was down the hall. And he was like, yeah, I'm 16. So I need to make whatever, I forget what he said. It was like 5/8 or something. Anyway, of his
Yeah,
decisions. And so they were all doing, and then they were doing the math because we're geeky homeschoolers. But
yeah.
anyway, it was really great because they have like it's seeped into that. And then as adults, we get really frustrated with how masculinity, for example, and in the adult world is waning and it's like deteriorating, and we wonder
Hmm.
why. And it's because we're not allowing them, in my limited view, we're really not allowing our young men to really practice being the kind of adult man we want them to be, because we are not allowing them to take those risks, to go out and get a job, to learn how to be around girls in a respectful way, and then they go off into college or the workforce or whatever. And like you said, they're making that with full agency and full consequences, versus in our home as homeschoolers, this is the safest place on earth
Yeah.
for them to like take risks in a very low risk way, right? They can have failures in an extremely low risk way. So anyway, I'm
or
just,
or even just on a more basic level, just
yeah,
to have their kid be like, have your son like, I'm taking my bike and I'm going into town. I'll be back in 3 hours, and not being like, oh, where are you
yeah,
gonna go?
yeah, yeah.
Like that's even something that I notice parents struggle with today.
Hmm.
Is like just letting their kid go play somewhere,
Hmm.
without
Yeah,
knowing exactly who's going to be there, what's going on,
yeah.
like
Or tracking their phone and their like location on
tracking
the
their
phone.
phone. Yeah, tracking their phone. Like my I promise this will be the last thing, but like I'm gonna blur everybody's names and identities so nobody's talking about. But like, there's someone I know. Their son had a friend stay over recently. They're both like 16 years old,
Yeah.
and they decided to go for a walk, in the evening. And they're
Mhm.
like, "Hey, let's walk down the train tracks and go to the corner store and get some sodas." And they're walking down, and like the kid's phone starts blowing up, and it's the mom like, "Where are you? Why are you on the train? Why are you walking on the train tracks at night?" And
Yeah.
like the mom's like sitting there at home, like
Yeah.
watching where he's at, and
Mhm.
he's like, "Me and so and so were just walking to the store to get some
Mhm.
soda." Like,
Yeah.
so it's kind of like, for me, it's like, that's, I often tell like parents be like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and I'm like, "Okay, give your kid $10 and send them down to the store." And then if they're,
Yeah.
they're like, like, now I
Yeah.
know, maybe you live in downtown LA and that's not something you want to do. I don't know,
Right.
but but I don't know. When I was a kid, it's always proverbial, like
Right.
back in the '80s, like we stayed out till the street lights came on and then we came home.
Mhm.
I know
Yeah.
it's a different world, but I don't know. Yeah, just very basic, low level things,
Yes.
like just letting them make some of their own decisions and go where they're going to go.
Yeah.
Anyhow, there's a
I
lot that
love
could be
it.
said about
Yeah, we
it.
could absolutely go on and on. I absolutely love just this whole conversation. I appreciate your openness and your willingness to share with us and get into the nitty-gritty of your past and all of that. I think it just makes you such a wonderful teacher. I know I have one of my boys is going to be taking one of your classes at Homeschool Connections Live this fall, and I would love for you to just share where people can find you. If there's any books or anything you want to promote, please. This is the time. I know people are going to want to come see how they
Yeah,
can work with
sure.
you.
Sure. So you can find me on, I have a website, phillipcampbell.net. That's Philip with two L's,
Okay.
phillipcampbell.net. Don't go to .com or you will get the guitarist from Motorhead. So go to phillipcampbell.net. That's my website. You can find all my classes on
Mhm.
homeschoolconnections.com. You can find me on Facebook at Phillip Campbell Author Teacher. Or on YouTube on Mr. Campbell Explains, although the channel is kind of goofy and I mainly post, I don't know, I mainly post comedic content these days, but the compilations you talked about. And as for my books, you can find a comprehensive list of my books on my website, phillipcampbell.net, or if you just go to Amazon and Google, like, look up books by Phillip Campbell, it'll bring up a list of everything I've done.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And will you say that book that's coming out soon? Because I think some of us are going to want to go look for that, the In Pursuit of something.
Yeah, it's called In Pursuit of Wisdom, Science and Catholicism Through the Ages by Our Sunday Visitor. It'll be in print in spring of 2024.
Love it. I'm so excited for that. That sounds amazing.
Yep.
Phillip, thank you so much for your time today, for your openness and sharing, and just for your yes, your constant yes to the Lord and wherever He's taking you, and for all of the goodness that has come from that and will continue to come from that in the future.
Thank you. And I'll make sure to be extra hard on your son in class.
Thank you. Please do.
All
All right. Have a
righty.
great day.
Thanks.
Thanks so
Yep.
much.